for Chapter 1, Collecting, Observing, Analyzing, Preservation, and Submitting of Evidence. This is the fourth step that's done at the crime scene. The first was securing the crime scene. Second was observe and document the scene. Third was search for evidence with documentation. And the fourth one is collect, preserve, inventory, and package evidence, maintaining the chain of custody. So the evidence must be collected, preserved, inventoried, and packaged in preparation for submission to the crime lab after documenting the discoverer, time of discovery, location, and appearance of evidence. So you collect the evidence, you write down the who discovered it, the time of discovery, the location of discovery, and its appearance, and then you can send that off. Oh, and then it's packaged and able to be submitted to the crime lab. It's good to go to the crime lab, but it's not sent there yet. The known and the reference samples are just as important as the evidence and must be treated carefully. It's the way that they put them together. Substrate controls are also collected. They are materials collected in the proximity of the evidence or reference sample collections. So, for example, if there's a blood-stained piece of carpet near the victim, you would also get a piece of the same carpet that's not stained, so somewhere else in that room, for the piece of carpet that's not stained as the substrate control. This is also true, so let's say there's a stain on a carpet, then, or it's like a little off, you would take that piece and then a piece of another of the same carpet laid somewhere else in that room, and then test those. So that piece of carpet doesn't have the evidence on it, but is still used to compare to evidence, is called the substrate control, and it's just as important as the physical evidence found at the crime scene about the crime. They can also exclude a piece of evidence as pertinent because if the same stain or fibers are present in both the stained and unstained portions of the carpet, then it probably wasn't a factor in the crime. So the stained piece of carpet you took and the unstained carpet, they are from the same, they look exactly the same, and when you analyze them, that probably means that that stain was already there and had nothing to do with the crime. So it's not a factor, you don't have to do anything more with it. And usually only one individual is the evidence collector. This helps with the chain of custody. So, chain of custody, we hear it all the time. It's the written chronological record of each person who had an item of evidence in his or her possession. It's the paper trail of every person who has had contact with the evidence. It begins with the original discoverer. The chain of custody should be attached to each evidence container. This minimizes the number of people in contact with evidence because every person who handles evidence must be able to show an unbroken chain of custody. The prosecution must account for evidence from discovery to collection of analysis to storage to transfer and any modifications throughout the entire process, including court proceedings and appeals. So, chain custody is really important, especially when you're introducing evidence in a trial. If it doesn't have proper chain of custody, then it might be able to be thrown out or disputed. When I worked or interned at the CBI in Pueblo, they would have the evidence bags with a chain of custody form on there, and every time you took it out of the evidence room, even if you didn't open it, but you took it out of the evidence room, you put your name and your information on it, and then it would go back in, and you never have it out for more than the time you need it. You take the sample out, you do your analysis on it, and then you put it back in there and put it back in the locker or wherever you keep your evidence. If this is not properly done for every single person who touches that piece of evidence, then it might be able to be thrown out. What will evidence collected at a crime scene do for the investigation? It can prove that a crime has been committed, can establish key elements of a crime, can link a suspect with a crime scene or a victim, can establish the identity of a victim or suspect, can corroborate verbal witness testimony, can exonerate the innocent, can give detectives leads to work within the case. So evidence is the core to a criminal prosecution. If you don't have evidence, then you can't charge anyone. There's no basis for it. Okay, so there's different types of packages when you get different types of evidence. So different types of evidence require specific collection and packaging techniques. So the type of packaging chosen depends on the type and the amount of evidence that is collected. So there are different packaging over here you can see, and all of it, and what you use depends on what you find. The package must protect and preserve the evidence. Every item needs to be packaged separately. If you find a stolen jewelry or broken jewelry at the scene in a pile, you do each one separately, in items separately. You don't put all the jewelry in one, you put them separately, and then you note on the evidence log that they were found together. Laboratory weighing paper is preferred. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's the little squares that you use. I know it's not really a square, but a square you use when you weigh something out on a balance. It has kind of the waxy side on it. And this is good for trace samples because it's made so that powders and small items don't stick to them. Liquids, it's crucial that they do not evaporate while they're in inventory, and they don't evaporate from when they were taken from the crime scene to when they are used in the court or analyzed. Small sample, you can have a screw cap glass bottle. A large sample, you can do a paint can. Packaging types, again, so blood must be preserved properly to prevent DNA degradation. Moist blood that's placed in an airtight container is a great environment for mold and mildew to grow in. If mold and mildew grow in your blood sample, your evidence becomes contaminated and it has no more value. Wet blood at the crime scene. So what do you do with this moist blood? You let it dry at the crime scene, and once it's dry, it can be scraped off and put into a paper envelope. So you can collect it on a swab and let the swab dry, and then you can put it in an envelope or package. Clothing can be put into large paper sacks. Do not fold the clothing because it can cross-transfer trace evidence from one area to another. You put the clothing in a large paper sack as you found it. Don't fold it, don't bunch it up even more unless you need to get it in there, but do not try to make the different areas touch to each other. If possible, it is best to take the entire piece of evidence as it is found at the scene. So if the question sample found at a crime scene is on top of or connected to a huge structure, then it should not be removed. So let's say a bullet is stuck in a wall. You're not going to take the whole wall. But if there is blood on a mattress and a stab through the mattress or something, then the whole mattress would be taken to the lab. So in summary, the evidence must be collected, preserved, inventoried, and packaged to prepare to submit to the crime lab, all with proper documentation at each step. Chain of custody is the paper trail of every person who has had contact with the evidence, and it is extremely important. The little details can be used against you if you do not document it properly. Different types of evidence require specific collection and packaging techniques to make sure that they are not degraded. So make sure you pay attention to that. And each item is packaged separately. Do not put more than one thing in each package. So that was this video. Next